Welcome, Lisa. So I'll do my abbreviated introduction. We've worked together in the past, but Lisa is the principal with SCUMAS Economic Research Associates. And Lisa, I'll let you go ahead and take it from there.
Thank you. If you can go to the to slide 5 to make things easy, that would be terrific. Okay. Great. That's the one. Okay. So I've been asked to give a short summary of some detailed works of inventorying and assessing near-term and long-term contamination strategies that we've conducted over the years, and we are updating this work currently with loads of case studies and additional quantitative analysis for EREF. As you can see from this picture, there's an array of near-term strategies that have been implemented, including strategies at the curb, at processing, and through changes in responsibility, mainly contractual methods. At the curb, we have, starting at the left, changing collection back to dual stream. First, single stream and dual stream materials can be cleaned at today's MRFs, and we'll get to that a bit later. But the bottom line is that this horse is out of the barn. Households strongly prefer dual stream MRFs and its convenience. Haulers prefer the collection efficiencies, and it works better for small commercial as well. We know of MRFs that have been built to dual stream specifically because they wanted clean, marketable materials, but they're being bypassed by all their local haulers who are driving 40 miles away to the nearest dual stream MRF because customers wanted single stream. That's kind of a low rating in our assessment of options. Another thing related to that is collection efficiencies, and having collection efficiencies are also vital. Cheaper recycling collection allows more money to pay for more processing steps and a cleaner ultimate product. Our research shows that every other week recycling is much better than weekly recycling, which costs only 1 to 3 percentage points more material at twice the cost. So those last extra tons are 5 times as expensive. Use that stock instead for organics, where you get 15 to 25% or more diversion. Optimizing stops for weekly organics and every other week recycling and every other week trash saves money that can then be transferred to cleaning the stream. Why try to minimize overall recycling costs as part of this problem or solving this problem? Collection through processing to market? Because trash collection is always evolving to get cheaper. And if the difference between trash and recycling costs get too high, then recycling programs may lose support and be canceled. And that can be a very near-term effect. This is a high rating, and some of the other collection efficiencies that we might want to look at are pay-as-you-throw, commercial pay-as-you-throw. We'll talk about those later. Bans and mandates with phase-in pieces, contracts, incentives, and some other strategies. The next thing on the little rainbow here is split glass. Some communities didn't want to lose tonnage towards goals or reduce recycling options, so instead they educated consumers that if they put glass in single stream, very little of it actually gets recycled, and that they should instead put glass in the drop-off bunkers located all around town or the drop-off centers, and that all of that glass material got recycled. This was a win-win because it reduced the amount of glass collected single stream, reducing the glass for potential contamination at the MRF, but it also kept the tonnage up because those who wouldn't go to bunkers still did have this single stream option. That has high potential and high viability in different communities. ADFs, the next one, ADFs, bag fees and bottle bills. Plastic bag bans or even 5-cent fees dramatically reduce plastic bag use, which reduces them in the recycling stream, reduces wrapping around MRF equipment and the associated downtime, and reduces people bagging their recycling. Bottle bills also pull glass out of the commingled stream, although of course there are administrative and duplicate system costs, but these options have a high rating as well. Moving over to the far right side, education. While our numbers indicate that education isn't the panacea everyone wants it to be, and it's less cost effective and it's more short-lived than other strategies, effective education is crucial to cleaning the inbound stream. But it needs to focus on a few materials, sell on values that the customers care about, motivate, not just educate, needs to address barriers, use trusted messengers, and we find that retention and therefore the cost effectiveness is much better if you have a personal component. Door to door normally, but in this COVID time, our research finds that personalized oops-tied cart hangers can get you a long way there as well. This is a high rated strategy and really important. The next step talk about processing, and key is updating processing steps. Robots have made and continue to make enormous strides in the US and across multiple continents, including amazing equipment made right here near my office. Optical scanners and other camera type technologies have also made a huge difference and huge efficiency improvements. Their flexibility to select on materials is also vital to an evolving waste stream. Our research shows three key things in processing make the vital difference to getting clean: management attention, slowing belts with shallower input, and adding steps like robots, optical sorting, and so on. This is a really high rating as well. You might ask, why haven't MERS done this anyway, or why haven't they done it before? I'm an economist. It's because of Econ 101 lesson called Gresham's Law, which in recycling translates to bad bales drive out good bales. The minute the first US mill paid for an out-of-spec bale, it caused a race to the bottom for quality. Every MRF operator reacted rationally. That one's sold. How about this one that skips more steps or is done at a faster speed? Okay, what about this one? And this forces mills then to become mini pre-cleaning MRFs, inefficient and crazy. This downward spiral predates single stream, by the way, and it took China to get us out of this downward spiral. Econ 101 tells you that you must have inspections and must reward good bales and the steps it takes to get to them, and penalizes bad bales. You have to have a reliable input commodity that can be used for processing, for production later on. More about that later. You could delete some materials, and some programs are reacting that way and just dropping glass. But our detailed MRF modeling steps indicates that you can harm the profitability of other materials by not looking at the integrated cost-sharing aspects of allocating belt costs across tons and across other shared equipment. This needs to be an integrated and not single material decision, and goals matter as well, and they're affected by this as well. This is part of what we're doing for EREF, and we think it's worth it needs more care in its implementation. Things that are responsibility changes are especially related to contracts and voluntary. So voluntary agreements like regional agreements on programs or unified outreach or quality specs have been tried but are a bit troublesome. Not only do they maybe make it for the lowest common denominator and squelch innovation a bit, but the minute one actor finds it more profitable to break the agreement, the whole thing can fall apart. It's not really such a strong long-term option. Contracts, however, are getting a lot of attention. They're a vital tool, and there are three main types that have been invoked in this area. The first type of contract is considering contracting for collection, mainly if the community's situation can gain efficiencies at lower costs. If it can, that can go to the goal of minimizing collection costs so that processing can clean up the stream and minimum changes in overall cost. The second type of contract is a gray one between a MRF and specific end users that want their specific, perhaps tailored material bales that the user needs. These stable arrangements are great, highly encouraged, and they help make sure a known quality material is reused as a feedstock. It relates to the market development strategy we'll talk about a little bit in a minute. The most talked about type of contracts is between cities and MRFs, and MRFs and haulers have been really pushing this one and changing contracts across the country. MRFs now prefer to be paid as a pure service provider, being paid for the act of processing. We've examined scores of contracts and gathered the best practices, steps, clauses, and typical dollars from across the country. The greatest success these contracts need to include threshold contamination levels set on the input stream and the output stream with regular statistical sorts at both to assure compliance. Penalties, financial penalties that are assessed for exceeding those thresholds. Our research is showing that contracts are looking for input streams anywhere from 8 to 20%, with most around 11 to 15%, output at 2 to 5%, or depending on market, other things, and inbound penalties on the order of $40 to over $200 per ton, averaging about $80 a ton for exceeding the input threshold for contamination. Agreements on who has responsibility and input on outreach, machinery changes, revenue sharing, and other items is also a key part of these agreements. Tracking periodic check-ins and renegotiations. And these are just the high points. We have lots of contract examples, data and best practices, so just feel free to call. I can't fit it in my 10 minutes. Next, local or state market development is a great idea as well, but despite our searches, we really have not found many examples of real-world excellence or cost-effectiveness here. Sorry to disappoint. Examples like South Carolina and some well-designed grant programs and a few others have had some success, but really only with strong staff and continued legislative prioritization. On the whole, since Clean Washington Center in the 1980s through to now, the track record is pretty spotty. Attributable cost effectiveness is generally pretty poor, and the success can be underlined in a heartbeat with a move of a company. And they're especially difficult in the near term to implement. I hope to hear more about this in today's discussion. Testing, sorting, rejections, and fines are actually a vital part of any system. China stepped in and basically did just that, including rejections. And we need to continue that for the US use as well. This step is absolutely critical for one of the two longer term strategies I want to talk about. Can you skip to slide 12 with the big red bar going through the middle? That would be great. It illustrates some longer term options that are crucial to consider. Commodity market trading, which requires the type of enforcement I was just talking about. The Chicago Board of Trade and its sister boards of trade, they trade commodities like hard red wheat or winter whatever, which is a defined commodity of input to food production and has specifications, clear specifications, allowing like 0.5% of sand or rat droppings or other contaminants. This known commodity is then traded now and with contracts for futures and options and so on. Recycling can and should be on these markets, but cannot be because the commodities are not currently a well-defined, known, reliable input commodity. With ISRI or other standards, with inspections and verification, it can be. And that trading has benefits, including market trading, ability to use futures and options, which help price volatility, a constant problem in recycling, and which makes community recycling programs costs more predictable. Cities certainly care about recycling costs, but they care even more about predictable costs, and commodity trading markets can help us get that. And that's not to say that recyclables have never traded on the markets. In fact, recycling paper did for a bit over a year in the late 90s, and we did an evaluation on that, but no time for that long discussion. It's a high priority, and to me as an economist, a vital need is clear market definitions and a regular trusted verification. It brings all kinds of benefits. For better or worse, China lit a fire under that. The last one I'm going to talk about, the other start option is carbon tax. In my book, this is, or cap and trade or whatever. In my book, this is the Valhalla for recycling. If virgin feedstock has to pay extra for all the energy used and incorporate the costs of those externalities that arise in extraction, processing, transport, etc., it adds dramatically to virgin cost per ton. And for most recyclable materials, that will mean recycling feedstock becomes the strongly preferred input, dramatically increasing demand, granted for a clean feedstock, but the price differentials will then allow for the processing to a clean feedstock. It is the thing all recyclers should absolutely be lobbying for, and it comes about as close to a panacea for recycling as you could possibly get. You can see other longer term options listed on this slide. Thanks. If you go to the last slide, please feel free to email me if you'd like more information on these options or the final study. I kind of hope that this provided a useful quick 10-minute summary and some context for some of the main strategies being used to address contamination and some input on the sessions on today's session questions. Thanks, and I'll turn it back to the Q&A panel and back to Manuel or Alec.
Okay. Contamination, ISRI has a specification circular, and it defines the different types of grades of the commodities. And in there, we have contamination defined as anything that's considered acceptable, that's considered not acceptable in the waste stream. And there's a lot of examples that we use, like shredded paper is a contaminant, plastic bags, plastic films, sharps, needles, expanded polystyrene, wallpaper, multi-layer pouches, and the like. So that's what we define as contamination. But in addition to that, often, and I think Lisa mentioned about the MRF contracts, it's really between the MRF and the community that they're dealing with, the municipality, to decide what's contamination and what's not. Because not all areas collect the same products.
Ruth, could you respond to that question as well?
Right. So to pile on, really, contamination is anything that's not a commodity. And so what I think when we're talking about recycling right, we're talking about what is a commodity and what is your commodity. You know, you need local commodities, but a lot of commodities are regional, national, and international commodities. So I think that's the thing to focus on. And in contamination, we've done a lot of materials characterization studies across the recycling, organics, and trash. And we've seen what the trends are. And by and large, folks know how to recycle right. Most people recycle right. A few people don't recycle right. And that's what ends up as contamination at the MRFs. And so really to pinpoint those problems, through individual, knocking on the door, giving them the oops tags, as Lisa was mentioning, is really the way to get to it. So when we've seen in our characterization studies, contamination really consists of the actual contamination, things that shouldn't have gone in the blue bin or the recycling bin at all, but also wish cycling. So there's some wish cycling, which are commodities potentially in some jurisdictions that aren't in others, right? Rigid plastics, 3 through 7 plastics being an example of the wish cycling that we see.
Okay, Neil, next. And,
Yeah,
and if you can hold up your finger like Neil just did, if you want to speak next, that's a great cue.
Thank you. I think my response is to remind people that dual stream worked in the country with very few contamination problems for 20, 30 years until big waste single stream came in. And that raises the question of MRF contracting. If Waste Management Inc. and so on, Republic are the only ones you can deal with, then there's really, you're in the grips of a monopoly. And I would point to Tulsa, Steamboat Springs, dozens of cities who have their own MRFs, some dual stream, some single stream. The key difference is if you want to recycle. The big shots, the big waste companies have cut out glass, which is a quarter of the waste stream. Drop off makes sense because if you put your glass in your single stream going to a Waste Management Inc. facility, you're paying a fortune and getting no recycling. As far as dual stream and single stream, the difference was that dual stream was an educational activity. It was a gateway, opening the door to households for all kinds of environmental education. And the single stream has undermined that by, as Ruth described, wish recycling, careless recycling, which led to the debacle in China. So the key for me is federal money being available through the Breaking Free from Plastic, not through EPR for PPP, but through product stewardship, where there's reimbursement to existing systems. And that capital is needed for cities to invest in organics, invest in dual stream and sensible single stream systems, which can work between 300 and 400 tons scale for the day. If that money is coming through in the next year, the United States recycling will take off. Investment is already pouring in. Cities are taking control of their MRFs. Cities are taking control of their marketing. And we will see a new revolution in recycling in the United States, shooting us up to 50, 60, 70% within a few years. If, however, EPR, the form of EPR that gives the materials to the Fortune 500 companies, we will see continued stagnation because it is against the fundamental vested interest, profit line, and political influence of the systems to keep recycling low. And that is why breaking free from plastic could be a major freedom or it could be a surrender. And it's a vital issue to all of us. I will be writing a few pieces that will be coming out soon. I recommend that people look at the Zero Waste Canada comment on British Columbia. They responded to the Product Stewardship Institute report, which gave a glowing picture of recycling in BC. Two documents that must be looked at. One is the Zero Waste Canada comment on that report, and second is the letter sent September 15th of this year by the BCBDRA, the bottling return companies, wrote to the Department of the Environment in British Columbia saying that if this EPR system continues, the bottle bill will be done. Because in Europe, EPR is based on bottle bills. In the United States and Canada, EPR is based on undermining bottle bills. So the breaking free from plastic is a critical moment, and it's unclear which way the country's going to go.
Thank you, Neil. And on the Breaking Free from Plastic, I assume you're referring to the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, Udall-Lowenthal bill?
That's correct.
Okay. Lisa, you're next up for responding to the contamination question. And if someone could send me the list of questions by email, I have not received them. GaryList@mindspring.com.
Gary List, they're in your chat. Along with Alec, they're in your chat.
Elisa, please go.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Elisa Seltzer with Resource Recycling Systems, and I believe contamination is defined, as mentioned previously, by the local recycling program, the community, and the MRF, ideally all working in concert together. I often think that contamination sometimes is a recyclable in the wrong place. So if your goal is zero waste, if your goal is maximizing diversion, you want to make sure there's access for recycling all of the materials, whether they're bulky, hard to recycle, potentially hazardous, etc. So batteries are contamination in a MRF. Most MRFs, film plastics are contamination, but if film plastic can be recycled, there might be an opportunity to do that. So I like to, it's important that the MRFs and the communities work together. It's often by contract, but there are a lot in information between many MRFs and their communities and the information that's being put out about what is appropriate to recycle in any given place. I was fortunate enough to implement and run Emmett County, Michigan's dual stream MRF and program for 30 years. And we realized that we could both maximize diversion and income from the sale of recyclables by being a dual stream MRF. Now, I believe single stream MRFs can be run well, but in Emmett County, we were able, with a very comprehensive drop-off program, able to take over 60 kinds of materials. So if a piece of scrap metal showed up at the MRF, that was not, it was contamination, but it got recycled. Same things with many other materials. So I think contamination, ideally the materials are marketable and ideally they're going to the right place at the right time. Thanks.
Great. I'm still looking for the questions. Could someone read the next question?
What are the latest processing improvements, e.g. more labor, slower belt?
Could you get closer to your mic? You're fading in and out.
What are the latest processing improvements, e.g. more labor, slower belts, more equipment, robotics, ? And I sent it to your chat and your email.
My chat is not getting it.
Sent an email to
Brett is up to respond to the question. Did you hear the question, Brett? Thumbs up. And we need your mic on.
I heard it, and I have it in front of me also. That the MRF robotics has been mentioned, I believe, already, but that's one of the latest and greatest things. Yes, optical solutions and all, but they also have mechanical arms that are being tested. There's some MRFs that have up to, I think it's 18 lines now with robotics collecting. They can collect somewhere near 60 to 80 pieces a minute, and they do it safely. So eliminating the human factor means that it's a safer environment also. And they also keep the constant rate going, whereas with humans, they do start falling off towards the end of their shifts and their productivity. So the robotics is a big issue. It's a safe issue. It will allow more to be processed through a MRF and at a lower cost ultimately, because every injury is around a $5,000 to $7,000 hit to the owner of the MRF. So things can be done. Some of the robotics can even do the layered approach of sorting, and that was one of the issues in the past. So if you had a stack of wood going through, they can take the top piece off, and everything underneath it can continue. So, but if you've seen a belt of a MRF, things are stacked up on each other, and so they can go through that stack and pick out exactly what they've been programmed to do. So that's what's going on at the MRFs. It's a safety issue. It's a big issue in our industry. MRFs, I think there's been one death this year at the MRF. And of course, collection of recyclables is another issue at the curbside. Anyway, I'll end it there.
Great. Thanks, Brett. Lisa, you already addressed the issue. Do you have anything more that you would like to add to that?
Yes, I was just going to say, I think the safety issue is important, but also attendance, labor showing up is important as well, and the flexibility of the robots to be able to change readily to different material mix and so on, depending on what the input stream is, what's desired output. I think it's just really beneficial.
Ruth?
Yeah, I was going to say that I don't know that technology is a panacea for us. What we've seen in some mission-driven organizations who manage processing systems is actually to slow the technology down, slow down the belts, reduce the depth burden of the materials, and put it more labor, physical, human labor on the processing. So we have really good examples of, lower tech solutions going slower. This will cost more, right? Potentially, but we need to be investing in what we want, which is produce high quality commodities that will be turned into new materials. So I wanted to offer that. We do see, that there is an investment, for example, in optical sorting that can help aid the manual sorters, but we've seen really good success with manual sorters being able to sort appropriately. So if these are good jobs, if they are well paid, if there are family wages and benefits, these can be very beneficial for a community. So I wanted to put that out there, that it's not always about technology, it's also about sorting for quality, and humans can do that as well. Oh, and I wanted to say one more thing, which is that Susan is here. Susan Kinsella from Conservatory is here on the stage, but her camera is off, Gary, so I don't think you are seeing her in order to call on her. So Susan, you would need to put your camera on so that Gary can call on you.
Okay, Neil's next.
I believe that Lisa was next, Gary.
Lisa.
Okay, thank you. So I also am most excited about the development in robotics and AI, but I agree with Ruth that there's a really great opportunity to optimize both the use of labor as well robots in concert, so that we're providing a safer environment for the workers to do the sorting and processing. We're also allowing for consistency, efficiency, and productivity. And the last thing I want to say about robotics that wasn't mentioned is the AI component. They are constantly learning, and the artificial intelligence components of it can continually make them more productive, more efficient, and also can do gourmet sorting sort by brand or other targeted materials. So it can be very flexible to shift sorting with the markets. Thank you.
Neil?
Yeah, robots cost about $70,000 or $80,000 a year. There's some amortization on that. And as Ruth pointed out, a waste sorter with a union contract probably will be making $20 an hour with benefits, which would probably bring it to about $50,000, $60,000 a year. And that's a trade-off. Do you want to have a good job in your community, or do you want to pay extra money for a robot? Different situations will bring different bottom lines, but I want to emphasize what Ruth and Elisa are saying, that dual stream does not necessarily need robots, and dual stream can reduce contamination and honor labor at the same time.
Great. Lisa has one quick follow-up response.
I would just argue that you need to look at the costs through the whole process, and the collection efficiencies in single stream make up some of that difference as well. So, and the strong preference we have to be realistic, and there's a strong preference by households and businesses and collectors for single stream. So it's not that single stream is not the devil, dual stream is not perfect. Both of them can be cleaned up by MRFs if we spend the right amount of time and management attention and so on at that end. So both can.
Great.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Brett.
Yes, manual labor is good, and it can be efficient. But if it were so good now, you'd see the MRFs moving towards hiring more people, which they can't find, and so therefore robotics comes in, and so there is an economic issue here, and private industry is looking at labor as well as robotics. Both are on the table, so they're not excluding one over the other. But when you can't find labor, you have to get the job done somehow.
Great. We're going to go on to the next question. To use materials domestically and bring recycling jobs home from China. I'd like to go in reverse order. Susan, you are on stage. You just need to turn on your mic and camera in the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. If you don't see the bottom of the screen, try scrolling your screen up with either touch screen or holding down your cursor and moving it up that way. So we're going to go with Lisa first on using materials domestically and bringing recycling jobs home from China. And Elisa, we'd like you to also highlight, as you're here from Next Cycle, Michigan, to highlight that initiative as part of your response.
Terrific. Thanks. Yes, I'm really excited to share some information on Next Cycle, Michigan. It's a state of Michigan initiative that is powered by Resource Recycling Systems, Centropolis Accelerator, and the Michigan Recycling Coalition. Collaborative partnership that's anchored by Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And it's really a 21st century innovative approach to market development, recycling and recovery, and we are bringing it home in Michigan. We had an earlier version that's still going in Colorado that has some great success stories coming out of it. It really connects the dots in the supply chain from access and infrastructure to market development and economic development, and strengthens collaborations between communities and public and private stakeholders to drive positive impact on recovery, communities, and the planet. It has a few key elements. One is it's data-driven. Michigan's goal is to increase the recycling rate from the current 18% to 45%. Doing so would drive economic growth, tune of over $9 billion in labor income and over $33 billion in economic output. Analysis of the data on end markets, MRF capacity, and other chain drivers inform innovation challenge tracks. These challenge tracks, I'm getting some reverb. Okay, that's better, thank you. So these innovation challenge tracks are like incubators and accelerators, and it's really bringing accelerators into our recycling space and providing an opportunity for folks to partner, collaborate, network, provide subject matter expertise, mentorship, all kinds of opportunities to grow their ideas, their business plans, their product development using recycled content materials so they become real on the ground in Michigan. It's a couple of challenge track examples showing how this is really Michigan based but could work in other states. One of them is focused on organics, a critical component of increasing recovery. Another is focused on roads and trails and the use of recycled content materials that need end market drivers in the state, like compost, glass, tires, asphalt shingles, and plastics. It's super collaborative. Applicants are encouraged to team up and really grow their bandwidth and capabilities. But once you're accepted into a challenge track, collaboration between teams is facilitated along with the technical advisory committee and the innovation panels. There's also a component of this program that is called the Renew Partnership Portal, and there are funding, partnership, and sponsorship opportunities. So a manufacturer or an association that's invested in seeing recycling improve in the state could sponsor a challenge track, say on organics or on the recycling supply chain, and really find the place where their mission and goals overlap with that of the state's missions for this initiative. I would encourage you to check out the website at nextcyclemichigan.com. You can sign up to stay in the loop on it, and we have a webinar coming up on December 15th. You can register from the website. And a couple other things I just want to share is that there's a really strong equity focus and really trying to, part of our vision for local, regional, statewide circular economy is to make sure we're impacting communities, all communities, in positive ways, and that there are huge impacts on climate if we do this well and really build that robust circular economy. We could see by tripling Michigan's recycling rate, we would avoid over 7 million metric tons of carbon equivalent. So lots of really exciting opportunities, and I look forward to taking questions later. Thanks.
Great. Neil, next.
I'm quite sorry, Gary. Could you repeat the question?
We're talking about using materials domestically and bring recycling jobs home from China.
Yes, I'm looking forward to getting more information from Elisa on that next cycle program, and I'm sure it can be replicable in other states. My short comment would be that organics, composting, and reuse are the best investment for local economic development in terms of value added, as well as the markets. There are no markets for reuse and organics that are beyond the local region. So that's about 35 to 40% of your waste stream, more if you live in the southern part of the country. And those are the first investments cities should be making for bringing material, for developing their local markets. I would also point out that, again, as I said earlier, there are thriving markets with shipments going cross-country from small cities to big plants. We're working on maps and charts showing all of this. You do not need the Asian market to have robust recycling in the United States. And you do not need big waste companies dominating our waste stream and making us move our recyclables 20, 30, 40 miles outside of city for processing. It's the antithesis of recycling to be shipping low-value materials more than 30, 40 miles, actually outside your immediate city, your immediate metropolitan area.
Great. Ruth?
Yeah, and there's a note in the chat that folks aren't speaking. They should mute their mics because there's been a little bit of background noise. It might be you, Gary, and when you turn off your mic, you disappear. So you might want to come back on your camera just so we can see you as well. Yes, I have a little bit of a difference of opinion in terms of focusing on. I agree that reuse and organics and construction debris materials really need to be addressed locally. But things like plastics, paper, these are internet metals, these are international commodities and really need to be treated as such. And they should flow to where they can be the highest and best use for local markets. I think what we need to think about is that a lot of times we work with islands, right? And like, for example, in Hawaii, where they have a limited onshore processing materials. They have to rely on shipping materials long ways away. So do we, right? In California, in Montana, in Michigan, you know, we have to potentially ship materials long ways. Well, that will flow if it's a high quality commodity to where it is best used. So I think you have to think about it that way. When we mine bauxite, when we, you know, make silica, it's being shipped from miles and miles away. So you have to think about it as these commodities, not necessarily that we need to do everything locally. You know, we can't all have a glass plant locally. We can't all have, you know, a plastics recycler locally, but we can provide the incentives and the opportunities to the markets and the high quality commodities to the markets so that they can manufacture high quality commodities for us. One more thing, one driver in California has been the recycled content law for our you know, for our garbage bags, right? We have a plastic garbage bag recycled content law. We have a newspaper recycled content law. And as Jared mentioned earlier, we now have a recycled content law for bottles. This will have somewhat of an unintended effect, not of necessarily more production locally, but we're going to be drawing in commodities from across the country to California for remanufacturing. And you know, when our plastic recycling of our plastic garbage bag recycled content law came into effect, folks in Ontario were like, oh, goody, we can send our stuff to California. So I just wanted to put it out there that quality will attract quality, and our goal is to make new commodities out of new commodities in that circularity system. Hi, Manuel.
Sorry for it looks like I wasn't the only one, so I'm glad to be on. Had to switch computers, so this helped. So are we on question? Which question are we? What was?
We're Manuel, we're on the third question. I'm posing the questions. If you can join in at the fourth question, and then do your presentation at the end, seems like the best way to go at this point. So let me continue finishing up the third question. So Lisa's next up, and show your hand if you want to go next.
Hi. I just really briefly, I think to get materials to be used at home and to bring the jobs home, the really important vital first step is getting clean, known materials that are well defined, meet standards, and that firms can rely on as a reliable source of input. And I think until we have, ISRI standards or others that are used regularly, routinely, and that we have verification to make sure the materials are exactly those specs, that is what's going to bring the trade home. That's going to be what is a reliable feedstock and stops turning our mills into pre-processors and then mills, and then they ultimately leave using recycling. So that I think is really important in the longer run. Boards of trade and carbon are all things that are going to bring the jobs home.
Hey, next up, who hasn't spoken?
I have.
Brett.
So I concur with what Ruth is saying about the commodities. Lisa mentioned the ISRI specifications again. Those are good resources. In addition to what they said, I don't know that the goal is to bring home jobs from China. I think the goal is to have more materials and commodities recycled, whether it stays here, which about 70%, depending on the commodity type, 70% does stay locally or domestically, 30% is exported. For paper, it's somewhere near 42% that's exported, and the rest stays domestic. So we have to keep that in mind. And the other thing we have to keep in mind, which is what Ruth mentioned, is scrap is not waste. Okay, so all these commodities are not waste. They're viable materials that are used in other products, and that's what we need to promote. Yes, China has put shimmers through the industry, and the industry is adjusting. The investment that's going on with new plants, new processing mills, and all new relationships are being built with other countries and internally and domestically. So when you look at the economics, for every direct job in recycling, there's about 3.24 jobs that are created. Wages, it's a multiplier of almost 3. Taxes paid because of recycling is 12.9 billion in the United States. So, yes, plastic exports are down, paper exports are down right now. Yes, China is changing things, but the goal is to recycle more.
Okay. Anyone else didn't get to speak? Okay. Manuel, why don't you go on to container deposits?
Yes, so the deposit system. I wanted to hear from experts. What would you suggest do to improve this? Obviously, we need more container deposit programs, but the current ones out there might not be working as best as they should. Thinking about my state in California, but what can we do to improve these programs and to get a much cleaner material? Would Elisa, would you like to go?
Sure.
I would just add
speaking
to that.
From the Michigan perspective, we have found that Michigan deposit law has provided a great percentage of recyclables being returned containers. So it has been very effective. It's been a constant legislative battle back and forth year on year to either expand or defeat the bottle bill. And so to say just as it is, I think Michigan was the first bottle bill in the country. It's been very successful. I think until other recyclables are recovered at the same rate as what the bottle bills can do, it's important to keep them in place and improve upon them when we can, when it's politically feasible. But it's certainly worked well in Michigan.
Great. Ruth, you have some knowledge of our California programs. What do you think we could do to improve California programs?
Right. So, currently there's a bit of an undermining of our deposit system, because in California, somewhat different from other states, we use our bottle bill money to pay for curbside recycling. And that has created a perverse disincentive to keep the containers in the curbside rather than bringing them back to the stores. And so that has really undermined the ability of the California legislature to reform our bottle bill to be more of a traditional bottle bill, which encourages consumers to bring back materials to recycling centers and to stores. Because we've had a deterioration of our recycling centers and a disincentive across California, it's very difficult for consumers to find a place to bring their bottles and cans back. And so it's a really big problem that California needs to solve. But I want to put the concern directly on the service providers and the communities that are just using the money to subsidize curbside, which is not the intention of the bottle bill. I wanted to say to really emphasize the fact that if we want glass to glass recycling, can to can recycling, plastics PET to plastic PET bottle recycling, we need to do that through buybacks and drop-offs and not through curbside primarily. It's going to be much more effective to get clean commodities again by returning that behavior of bringing things back to the store. Oops. Next.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Go, Brett.
Our theory is that where markets exist in recycling, then we should just leave them alone. I understand the bottle bills, make it cleaner product, and it may not. There's curbside already established. Why do we want to create another avenue? It's inexpensive. It's pretty clean. There's technology. There's jobs involved in all, and it's easier for the consumer to put it in the bin. So it seems like it's more efficient. The carbon that's produced by a single collection vehicle going down the road rather than 100 vehicles going to their drop-off center. And then, of course, the issue is you have to pay out money for a dime or a nickel or whatever the collection fee is. So it seems like there's a market that exists, and it should be just left alone and let it operate and improve it.
Lisa?
Yeah, I think it's the jury's still out. It concerns me to have two separate systems. It concerns me to pull high value into one and leave the other with less high value. It concerns me to have admin that's
Could you get closer to your microphone, please?
Sure, thank you. And it concerns me to have admins, separate admins, all the rest of that. I wonder if the EPR model is something like what's in BC or elsewhere might be the better solution for it, or just making sure that what we have is a long-term efficient system all the way through. Two parallel systems are inherently concerning, but it definitely depends on how the system is designed. I haven't seen numbers that are compelling that show me a verdict one way or the other. I will say, though, that getting problem materials out is good. Getting clean materials out is good. I think that the curbside programs, with the enhancements we've been talking about, have great potential.
Just to chime in that the curbside is limited, right? I mean, not all consumers are in curbside programs. We have a vast majority of materials that are produced by multifamily households and commercial businesses that don't have access to sites. So just putting it out there that there's not one panacea.
Lisa?
As a response, absolutely. I think drop-offs are important. I talked about them specifically in class. I think they're important as well. And I will put a caveat next to your comment about multifamily. I think we need to deal with single family first and commercial second and multifamily last because of the 25 to 35 years of problems we've been having. Let's deal with the low-hanging fruit first and then deal with the problem material, the hardest.
Neil, you haven't chimed in. Neil?
Gary, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Neil next.
I don't see
Right.
Neil. I think he's dropped
Okay,
out.
Brett, go.
Brett went.
Brett.
Manuel's
No,
trying to
Brett
get in.
had his hand
I
up.
was my comment. Yeah, I had my hand up. I believe somewhere near 92 to 94% of Americans have access to recycling, either through the curbside or through drop-off. I think it's somewhere near 70, low 70s for curbside, and 20% more have drop-off. So it seems like it's pretty well established. Multifamily, yes, that's an issue. So is commercial, but those are issues that have to be addressed. That's true.
Can you hear me? Can somebody?
Well,
Oh, excellent. I turned off my cam, so it's been having issues here. I wanted to ask it to the panel. And by the way, Gary, Neil had to drop off to go to another interview, to another panel. So he put that in the chat. So I want to pose an question to our current panel here, and is what about deposit systems for hard to recycle items? So now we're going into the realm of in a way, well, not really EPR, but it's more of a deposit program for that. What do you guys think about that?
I'm for it, and we have it. Advanced recycling fees also in different states, and so that can be very effective. We have that for mattresses, we have that for e-waste, we have that for oil. Advanced recycling fees can make a difference, can produce incentives for the market and create opportunities for recycling right for those hard to recycle materials. So an incentive for those hard to recycle materials, either bringing them back in traditional buyback or drop off. Advanced recycling fees in order to get the programs supported either through advanced recycling fees or EPR is a strategy for hard to recycle.
Dr. Skumatz?
I think the existing ones make a lot of sense. Batteries and all the rest of that, and oil and the rest of it makes a lot of sense for specific materials. I think it's hard to recycling is a really key part of the definition, and I wouldn't expand it to every material out there.
How about the hard to recycle items like flexible plastics, packaging?
You know, currently we have students that are bringing all that stuff to school and shipping it off to TerraCycle, right? Where there may be marginally a market for that. So if a commodity has a market, and we've been told that flexible packaging has a market, if you can get it to us, we can't address them at MRFs. They're too flat, right? So we don't have a technology for addressing the flexible packaging in MRFs. But if there was a 10-cent deposit, you know, my students in the schools I work with would be happy to bring those back to the store and get money back for their flexible packaging, for sure. But there would have to be an actual real market for recycling those things back into new products. And I think that, you know, this straight line system of, you know, flexible packaging to roofing tiles is probably not a good solution.
So with 20 minutes left in our session here, I'd like to move on to the next question, which is dual and single stream collection and processing. So Elisa, in Michigan, you could give us a little bit of a overview of what's going on. But what is your thoughts? What is your preference? I guess is dual, single stream. Which one's the best?
So, speaking on behalf of my experience in Emmett County over 30 years, I have a strong preference for dual stream. Emmett County recently upgraded and remained dual stream, but added 3 robots, which was welcomed by the staff. It did not reduce labor at all, but improved morale, throughput, and quality even more. But I will say, as an RRS senior consultant, and recognizing that most of the volume moving through facilities in the country, as well as in Michigan, are moving through single stream facilities. And so, so what I am seeing when I'm looking at how the value of many materials have fallen since Green Fence is that Emmett County, I can't speak for other dual stream programs, but I know that their market basket pricing is way higher than both the national and the Midwest region. They have fared way better over the last couple of years. And, you know, yes, prices are soft, but everything is moving. They haven't had to stop taking any materials at all. And by the way, Emmett, because it's a dual stream MRF and they can keep the plastic film dry, Emmett accepts plastic film curbside, both commercial and residential, and has a ready market for it. So it's possible to do that. Now it's, you know, it's a regional MRF, but it's still in a relatively rural area. So, you know, it might not be feasible nationwide, but, you know, you hear of programs going back to dual stream from single stream. You know, can't speak to that. Sure, it's possible, but I can say that the markets are stronger, more stable, and paying better for dual stream commodities.
Go ahead.
And I did want to address a question in the chat, which is what is define dual stream and single stream. So when we're talking about it in our panel, the single stream is where all recyclable commodities and materials are collected in one cart or one container. So the paper and the plastics and the glass are all commingled. And dual could be a split cart, which we see a lot in California, a split cart system where it's the same cart, but there is a divider down the middle, and both the cart and the truck have a divider so that paper and containers can be separately collected and then managed separately. So my take on dual stream versus single stream is that both can work. Both can work very successful, and we do have examples in California for some communities going from single stream to dual stream, sometimes in response to wanting to sort for quality. So, but both systems can work. We have excellent single stream programs, and we have excellent dual stream programs. And I think Lisa mentioned it's not a panacea. Some dual stream programs are not that good. It really depends on you know, the quality of the materials getting into the container and then being sorted properly at the MRF. So I think where I come down on that is that it's going to be a decision based on what is available regionally. We have very little in my little region where I live, very little access to dual stream processing. And so it's really not going to be possible in my community to switch from single stream to dual stream, but we do have an excellent single stream MRF. So that's fine. There are some practical issues with regards to a single dual stream, which is that how do you fit that cardboard box into half of a cart? It's more difficult. Some communities, you know, you put that on the side of the cart and you recycle it separately. The driver has to come out and chuck it into the paper side of the truck. So, you know, there are options, there are workarounds. I think communities can design excellent programs, but they need partners with their service providers and with the MRFs to really slow down, sort for quality, be mission based, and be willing to pay appropriately. And I think that is something that we have realized in our area, is that recycling is not free. There are, you know, value related to the commodities, but the whole collection and processing system is 80% of the cost of any collection program. And so the marginal difference is in that some stuff goes to the landfill and has to be paid for, and some stuff is marketed or is you pay for it to be marketed. You know, that's a marginal difference in terms of the cost to me as a consumer, as a householder. So we just have to recognize these things cost money. There's value in it. We heard yesterday there's a really good reasons to do this other than just economic, which is climate and culture and sustainability. And so as communities, we need to embrace that opportunity and make it happen. Single stream, dual stream, we need to sort for quality.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dr. Skumat.
I think for me, the choices relate to sustainability, and that's economic sustainability and overall sustainability, green sustainability. And so we have to look at it from the beginning to the end. We can't wish that, you know, what we think is pure is the right answer necessarily. We really have to look at it using a total value stream analysis. And the fact that it's faster and cheaper to collect single stream weighs in its favor. The fact that it might be a little bit cheaper to process dual stream, that weighs in its favor. You have to look at the whole process, I think, and to me, there's the economics so far seem to be favoring single stream. That's what I'm finding in our look all through the market. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention though is that single stream versus dual stream, for places that already have single stream, this horse is out of the barn. There is almost no way you're going to get people to go back to dual stream collection, I believe. And so I think where this matters is more where it's already dual stream and you're deciding whether or not to go to single stream, or whether you're going to drop off to collection or things like that. But for places that are single stream already, the market has really spoken hard, and the places that put in a dual stream MRF in a place where there was single stream collection found their MRFs being passed right on by, driven right on by to the nearest single stream MRF. So I think it depends on where you are in the process, where this question comes down.
Eliza, you raise your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that, really bringing this right back down to using materials domestically and bring recycling at home. One of the things that Emmett County is able to demonstrate, which really ties in well with the Next Cycle Michigan initiative, is that by positively sorting for highest and best use and to maximize diversion, Emmett County was able to keep 93% of its materials moving through its MRF in the state of Michigan, feeding 23 different factories and manufacturers, some of them up in northern Michigan, that if Emmett County had had a single stream MRF, those materials would not have been reclaimable or recoverable to go to those factories. So in terms of a circular economy and building a circular economy in a region, dual stream has a place. That's not to say that you can't also do that with what comes out of single stream MRFs. You just have to be really mindful of the end markets you're building for. Thanks.
Gary, I just wanted to add for Emmanuel, in addition to what you said, I'm not going to touch that, but I'm just going to point out that whether you do, dual or single stream, recycling is essential. The pandemic, that we had states deem that recycling is essential. We are a supply chain to the manufacturing sector, and it's a very important sector. So, now there's talk about where do the vaccines go? Do they go to the essential workers? Will the recycling community give vaccines as one of the first, waves of getting the vaccine distribution? So I just wanted to add that. The other thing about what Lisa said about the diversion rate in the county going to 93%. Diversion, or is it recycling? Is it commodities? And I think that the diversion has given the recycling community a lot of trouble. If you talk to some of the big collectors, they're saying that about the time that China stopped their imports of the materials, their contamination went from about 5 to 10% up to 20 to 30%. So the goal should not be diversion per se. So I know Lisa wants to say something on that, but I just wanted to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I just want to give a quick correction. It was that 93% of all the recyclables that were processed and sold to market stayed in the state of Michigan. So not that there's a 93% diversion rate. State of Michigan has an 18% diversion rate, and the county is at a 43% diversion rate. So again, it demonstrates that even with a high recovery goal and a mission of highest and best use, the recycling rate in Emmett County is still much higher than the state average.
Yeah, that clarifies things.
We may have lost Emmanuel, Gary.
Yeah, I'm going to chime back in. We've got 20 questions in the Q&A, so we're going to jump to those, at least to get a few of those. What are the panelists' opinions about whether or when to remove items from the publicized list of recyclables in response to market changes? And we'll start with the one who's got finger up, Ruth.
I think it's really important that when you're designing your programs, you're designing them around commodities. So if the materials are only marginally recyclable in your area and that you do not have strong end use markets, like if you do not have a market for plastic film, it's probably not a good idea to include them in your curbside programs to begin with, right? But if you have a vibrant market, or if a manufacturer, a group like the Carton Council says they'll buy your optical sorter so that you can get your milk cartons sorted appropriately, yes, absolutely keep that in your list. And then the fluctuations have to do with current market demand. Things are low, things are high. I don't think it's reasonable to ask residents and businesses to change on a dime about what goes in or what goes out. I think if there is a certain period of time where your robust market has has gone negative, okay, and you choose not to have that material recycled for some reason or put into the recycling stream, if it was a commodity, it will be marketed, right? Now, the price for that will change, and you may make the economic decision not to send it to a market versus the landfill. But I have a strong opinion that if it is a commodity, it should stay on your list. If it's not a commodity, you shouldn't have put it on your list in the first place.
Brett?
In addition to that, I agree. If what it's about, ISRI has a design for the environment. Design for recycling. It's a program that we've had for over 30 years, and it allows the recycling to take place in the design phase. So you know which products can be recycled, which what's available for recycled content and use in your packaging. So we highly promote the design for recycling in the beginning. We have something called the recyclability protocol that we're working through. Many of the brands are looking to change into fiber-based packaging. And so we're setting up a program that will look at the collection system from design through the MRF to the mill and then to new product. Working on the protocol as we speak. There's a MRF survey out. More in the MRF survey, doing the administrative portion for us. So that's going to help with the recycling and what's good. There's a quick question that sort of relates to this in the paper market. Someone asked in the questions about if I could mention what an outthrow is and what a prohibitive is. And that's used in the paper industry. An outthrow is when you're looking at a commodity of paper, if you're looking at, if you have a mixed paper in there, that's an outthrow. It's not supposed to be there. It's still paper. It's just not that. And then a prohibitive is something that's not even paper. So you got a can in there, or you got a piece of plastic in there, or some metal in there. That's a prohibitive.
Great.
So I hope that helps.
Lisa, next.
It's vital that we be focusing on materials that have strong markets. I agree 100%. That should be what's driving our purpose. I think it's really important to focus on things with especially strong markets and not spend a lot of time and confusion to people on things that are 2%ers with marginal markets and so on. And I see this drive to have more and more and more. And I think better and better and better should have been is really a key message. And we get more bang out of getting extra 2% out of things with a strong market than we do by getting 2% for something that's, waffly, hard to understand, messes up the stream. I mean, we really need to be sensible about doing a good job on things with good, strong, long-lasting, reliable, sustainable markets. So I think more is not always better. We need to think hard about it.
Lisa, do you want to try? It's Elisa or Elisa?
It's Elisa.
Elisa, right.
Yep.
Do you want to chime in?
I generally agree, and I think, however, this is kind of taking us to the next question. I think recycling incentives play a really strong role to start capturing the materials that might not have as much value, but can find another life. And so I like to think of both and. You have a commodity focus for your programs, but that you're always searching for new end markets and finding new ways to reduce, reuse, recover. So you are also driving towards zero waste.
Great. We'll go on to the next question from the audience, which is, with online shopping, our cardboard volumes have gone up significantly. How do you see this trend working with every other week collection of recyclables? Lisa?
Number one thing that you have to have if you're going to have every other week collection is you have to have the biggest container. So you need to have 96-gallon containers. That's not me, is it? Okay. You need to have 96-gallon containers and requiring people to flatten. And it works in every community I've seen, even with the Amazon boom.
To add on the every other week, I mean, we've seen this as a great innovation for communities that haven't started yet, right? Who don't already have routine recycling and compost streams. It's a great way of, in an economic way, as Lisa pointed out at the beginning, to provide more services for less money. But what we found is that the best way of recycling and composting right is to give everybody as easy access to recycling and composting as you do of trash, right? And so that idea of every other week trash and every other week recycling and every week organics can work in a lot of communities, but just in terms of for an economic reason to do it. But if you really want to maximize recycling and organics, you want to provide that conveniently every week.
Anyone else want to respond? Okay. Next question is, do you have concerns that manufacturers will choose recycling and energy recovery over reuse and repair responsibility?
And to say, I'd be very concerned about that. And this goes along to the point I think that Neil was making in the beginning about the concern of extended producer responsibility. And those extended producer responsibility systems can be implemented in a way that is very beneficial, like many state bottle bills are EPR systems, where manufacturers and retailers and distributors are involved in actually providing the recycling systems. But in terms of just supplementing curbside or just offsetting the costs of recycling, having the manufacturers involved in EPR programs is potential negative, because unless they are mission driven, which is as Brett was pointing out, getting their material back into the economic mainstream, they may go to the least cost option, which could be, burning and burying, right? So that would be a big concern. I wanted to just say one more thing about materials and give a shout out wearing the zero waste hat, that for these marginal materials and these non-commodities, I think there is an opportunity for banning them. If they are not, if they're truly not recyclable, or they're only marginally recyclable, we could ban them, or we could just say that is a discard that has to be landfilled or incinerated, and and that is a problem for us as zero wasters, right? We would rather see systems that are truly closed loop for recycling, and even better, returnable. And I did want to put a shout out for returnable. We had an excellent presentation from the Strauss Family Creamery the first day, which is that we do need to see the opportunity for returnables. That has to happen at retailers and recycling centers. And so bringing back the returnables, you can't do returnables in curbside; they get destroyed. So let's think about what is the best option. And I don't believe in an either or. We have curbside and drop off in Europe. We have curbside and drop off and buyback in Canada. We don't need to abandon one or the other. We need everything that's the best solution for maximizing closed loop and maximizing zero waste.
Lisa?
Go back to the one really short point, and that is, it would be great if we could have weekly collection of every material. But the California costs are much higher than other parts of the country for a reason. And it's because you want to have weekly collection of everything. A lot of other places are really worrying about costs and trying to keep costs down. And in order to keep costs down, the optimal, not the most convenient, but the optimal system may in fact be every other week recycling, every other week trash, and weekly organics. So it's a trade-off of whether you're willing to pay for Cadillac service or whether your town is not willing to pay for Cadillac service and wants to optimize collection for the maximum diversion for the minimum cost.
I guess that gets back to the issue of why are you doing this? Is it for climate change and to get the benefits of climate change, which then the small incremental costs for pursuing zero waste is one of the cheapest, quickest, most effective ways to address climate change. If you're doing it to have the cheapest system, you may as well landfill most of it. But with that, if you'd like to respond, I'll give you a 30-second response. Give you a 30-second response, Lisa.
I'm less than 30 seconds all the time. I think that sustainable is two kinds of sustainable. There's an 80-20 rule, and wishing that sending an extra truck down the street costs labor, money. I mean, it costs emissions and all kinds of things. You have to look at this broadly, not just say we want 100% green or we want 100% saving money. There's an optimum in between. That's what I'm arguing for.
Okay. Well, with that, we're going to thank all the panelists for a great discussion. Clearly, not everyone's in agreement with each other, which highlights what Jared Blumenfeld was saying earlier. Can we find some things we agree on, and let's go for those? Let's figure out what are the things that we all agree on and start providing more of a united front to legislators, both at the state level and federal level, to advance recycling and reducing and reusing and composting as much as we can. With that, sorry for the technical glitches to our attendees. Did an admirable job despite all of that, and again, it was a great discussion. I'll turn it back to Alec to head us out.
This one is going to be entitled to National Policy Town Hall on Buy Recycled. And I'm going to welcome up onto the stage Martin Bork from the Berkeley Ecology Center, who's going to be the moderator and is going to introduce our next group of speakers.
Welcome, everybody. People here, people coming back in. We have a great panel today, and it's going to be mostly panel discussion with myself and five other amazing folks with great perspective on buy recycled and recycling marketplace. And we're going to cover a little bit of the history of buy recycled programs, where we are today, and then look, what needs to happen and where we can move going forward. As folks join the panel, I want to ask you to drop off your camera and mic. Welcome, Jeff. Hi, Susan. If you guys could turn off your camera and mic. We saw Nina there for a second. We're going to put up a few slides to start. I will run through a little bit of background and orientation, and then I'll hand it over to Nina Butler of More Recycling. She's going to lay a bit of a framework around buy recycled and give us a little sense of the field. And then we're going to do a quick round robin with Susan Kinsella, Alicia Culver, Lynn Hoffman, and Jeff Donlevy. They will give us just very brief descriptions of some of the programs that are out there. Some of you may be quite familiar with some of these. They may be brand new to others. But just to give us a little bit of the lay of the land of the different buy recycle programs, what's been out there in the past, consumer facing, business to business, government, purchasing policies, procurement policies, et cetera. And then we're going to go into some questions and just really try and have a deep and rich conversation. We are covering, multiple commodity streams, and we'll talk about paper and plastic and aluminum and glass, et cetera. And really try and have a broad and rich, informative discussion. And hopefully, advance the conversation a little bit by having this amazing panel here together. So you ought to be able to see the slides, but they look small on my screen. I do see a little button to expand to full screen. I see Gary jumping in. Hi, Gary.
Hi, just to highlight that those 4 arrows in the upper right corner, you click on those and it goes to full screen.
Thanks a lot, Gary. So just to say, who's on this panel, I'm here. I'm from the Ecology Center in Berkeley. We do the curbside recycling collection for the city of Berkeley. First program in the country. It's a dual stream program using semi-automated carts, split carts and split trucks. And I'll just say, in terms of materials coming out of this program, they come out extremely clean. We have a very small kind of micro MRF that the community conservation centers run. And the paper that comes out of these trucks, you could pretty much bale it and market it. It comes from the field with less than 3% contamination. And so really it's just about separating the paper and the cardboard and getting some of the outthrows out. We'll talk about quality and quality concerns going forward. But next up will be Nina Butler, a More Recycling long-term analyst in the field. Many of you know her, amazing person who has real insights into many of the different markets and many of these different programs. And she's also former NRC board member who will talk about the NRC biorecycled programs. And as I said, give us a bit of the field. Susan Kinsella from Conservatory will be next and talk a lot about, talk briefly about the paper markets and biorecycled and recycled content in paper markets. Next, we'll hear from Alicia Culver and Responsible Packaging Institute. Been doing environmentally preferable packaging policies for decades and really driving a lot of the government and large corporate purchasing. Lynn Hoffman, my recycling colleague from Minneapolis, St. Paul and Eureka Recycling, one of the founding members of the Alliance for Mission-Based Recyclers, AMBER, and does the curbside programs and runs full-scale MRF in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And then we'll wrap up the round robin with Jeff Donlevy from Ming's Recycling out of Sacramento and Oakland. And I just thought on this biorecycled panel, we couldn't do it without people who are actually buying and selling recycled materials. So love all the insight and history and perspective that the analysts and advocates bring, but really wanted to have some people with their hands on materials here to talk as well. So if we get the next slide, I'm just going to talk very briefly about, kind of what this slide is really what we want to try and do today, and some of the topics that we want to touch on. And through the various conversations and questions that we have, we're going to get into economic challenges in the value chain, certification. Wow, that screen's getting really small for me. I'm not sure what's going on technically there, but it will. We'll talk about key considerations and maybe get into credits, which is an emerging thing in this space, and minimum recycled content laws, sort of mandatory versus voluntary approaches. If we go to the next slide, I'll just mention, it seems like the order has gotten a little shifted here. I'm going to leave these biorecycled slides for Nina to come back to. If we could advance a few more slides up to one that says the U.S. polyethylene capacity. Yeah. I think one of the main points that we wanted to bring forward today is that there has been a lot of focus recently on voluntary commitments from large corporate companies in terms of including recycled content in their packaging. And, we've heard it from Coke and Pepsi, and we've heard it from a lot of companies over the years. We've heard a lot of commitments. Many of them have not been met, I would say, the vast majority. And now we've got some new things like the Plastics Pact and others, particularly in the plastic space, where a lot of the packaging has shifted from glass and paper over the years into plastics, which still may be a small percentage of the tonnage, but it's a huge percentage of the items coming into recycling programs today. And just to note, like, to meet the commitments that people have made, the industry has no capacity whatsoever to meet the demand, the required demand that would drive. And even to meet some of the new minimum recycled content laws, like here in California for PET, 25%, it's not really clear where all that material is going to come from. The infrastructure and the capture rates nationally are just so. We identify early on that there is an infrastructure and capacity problem when we're really trying even just to get to circularity, much less, all the other so-called beneficial uses that recycled materials might get pushed into. If we could just go to the next slide. In talking about circularity, this slide shows various and sundry pathways and how a circular recycling system might work. And by circular, I'm really talking, package to package, bottle to bottle, box to box, container to container, can to can, for the kinds of things that we see in curbside programs primarily. But you'll notice that there are a lot of arrows in this flow that peel out. And, whether those are exports, and we don't know really what's happening effectively with them, or what percentage of those exports are actually recyclable or getting recycled, whether it's waste to energy, incineration, things going to, sort of shadier markets like cement kilns internationally, or, the emerging talk about so-called chemical recycling, which is technology that's been around for a very, very long time, but has never really panned out or penciled out. So I'm not sure why there's so much talk about it now, except that it's a good story to tell. But, a lot of these arrows peeling off are actually pretty major departures from circularity. And so when we're talking about biorecycled, one of the themes that we'll want to get into more deeply is, is it really a circular recycling? Are we putting the cycle back in recycling? Or are these, sort of ways to embed discards in the environment rather than sending them to landfill, and sort of getting back to some of the themes of the last session of, diversion and keeping things out of landfill. All that means is that we've got garbage being embedded elsewhere in the environment if they're not being made back into packaging and reducing demand on natural resources. So anyways, those were some of the kind of top line points that I wanted to get people thinking about as we move into this conversation. And I'm going to hand it over to Nina Butler, More Recycling, to talk us through some of a little bit of the background and context, and to cover some of the state of play, what's happening with biorecycled programs. And that's what we'll kick off with. So thanks, Nina.
Yeah, Gary, if you could go back to go ahead and pull up the biorecycled slides. So go one more. Yeah, so I don't know how many people know this, but there was a very exciting energy in the late 90s where NRC had organized the Biorecycled Business Alliance, and there were many organizations pledging, not only pledging, but actually resulting in billions of dollars worth of recycled content purchasing, all materials, but a lot in paper. And with all of these commitments, and there was a Harvard Business Review that talked about how companies that don't get on board with really incorporating recycled content are going to fall behind. So as Martin talked about, all of these barriers that are preventing us from really moving into a circular economy, looking at the fact that we subsidize on the one end and then we externalize costs and have artificially low disposal costs, we're in this situation now where we became really complacent by depending on the harder recyclable materials to go. Now in a situation where, as he showed the chart with a huge delta between capacity versus virgin production. So how do we get back to what we need to essentially do to balance the marketplace, which is core to economics? So if you go on to the slide that has the four pieces, we have to continue to ground ourselves, and we're not recycling to divert material. We're recycling because it really saves energy, it saves water, it creates jobs. There's all kinds of perfectly good reasons, but then why are we not doing it? Go on to the next slide. So I think it's important that we raise these questions, the next one, raise these questions. And as Gary and others have pulled together this panel, I think there's so much up in the air. There's a lot of important work happening that we need to bring to light. And then there's also huge challenges that have to be overcome. So just having buy recycled is not going to get us out of it, but it's an important step in basically stopping the bleed right now. So the NRC, and I have rotated off of the board, but we've started, when I was involved, we got a council started for market development. And I believe the NRC is in a unique position to reach out to the general public, as well as to serve as that true coalition bringing together organizations again. So there's a council being formed for market development, and the vision is to raise value of recycled feedstock to drive more sustainable use of resources to reduce waste. And the mission is to increase purchase of recycled content material. So it's the Buy Recycled Business Alliance, the Technical Council, and that's going to be formed. I hope to participate and support it, but it's really for all materials, and that's a unique position that NRC has. And also it's unique in that we're, I think there's an opportunity to really reach the public. That's not really, and when you look at this matrix, so here's a rundown of some things that are happening to support buying recycled for government and businesses, but there's very little that really reaches the general public. And I think that's an area of opportunity for us to focus on, is to bring value back into the zeitgeist. So I'll touch on the buy recycled possibilities later, but I think we should open it up, Martin, to others.
You need to turn on your microphone, Martin.
Thanks. Can you hear me now? Good. Yeah, so as we go around the horn here in our round robin, we'll touch on a number of these programs, not all of them, but I want to thank Nina for putting this table together, which really kind of shows at least some of the major programs that are out there. And some of these go back decades now and have a really deep and rich history. And I think it's a good time with markets where they are, and with the disruption that we've seen in the industry, to really stop and look at this and say what's working, what could use improvement, how can we move forward. And that's where I hope we'll get a little later in the conversation. So next up, I wanted to invite Susan Kinsella from Conservatory to talk a little bit about that program, and just asking each of our panelists to give a very brief summary of a couple of these different programs. Susan, can you come on?
Hey, Susan, you need to turn on your microphone.
Okay, is it on now?
You're all set. You're good.
Okay, good.
I hear you.
All right. Well, I've been working on biorecycled issues for 35 to 40 years now, and actually I've been in it since the very beginning. So what I want to talk about today is, why did we develop the concept of biorecycled? What are we trying to accomplish? What is its goal, and how close are we to that goal? When Conservatory started back in 1977, it was a scrappy upstart San Francisco paper distributor that partnered with paper manufacturers to create the first recycled paper markets in North America. And we knew that compared to making virgin paper, recycled paper created huge environmental savings and benefits, and recycled paper still significantly reduces greenhouse gases, greatly reduces energy and water demands, saves a whole lot of natural resources, especially forests, but also chemicals and other materials. It cuts way down on pollution and a whole lot more. And that's true for other product materials as well, not only as paper. But way too many manufacturing mills back then were determined to just keep using the destructive manufacturing processes that had worked for them for decades, and they were adamantly against change. And while there have certainly been great advances since then, there's also still way too much environmental destruction. So the purpose and the vision in developing biorecycled programs was ultimately to transform product manufacturing so that it still produces high quality, effective, necessary products while causing far less damage to the earth. If the manufacturers were not going to take the lead in making the necessary changes, then we decided, well, okay, we're going to need to gather millions of purchasers together to create such a huge consumer demand for environmentally sustainable products that manufacturers, one, would be driven to change to meet that demand, and two, would have kind of a safe customer foundation for kind of sliding into a different way of making products. So all of you who buy recycled content products are part of creating that powerful demand. And I figure that we're at maybe about the mature middle of the arc to that goal. We're going to hear a whole lot of detailed information on this panel about how to buy recycled products, but I want us to also keep this goal in mind, that the fastest and the most comprehensive way to reduce manufacturing's production footprint is for the definition of 21st century manufacturing to mean that all product manufacturers are using as much recycled content as possible. And in the future, we want to get to a future where we don't have to be asking for recycled products. Instead, recycled content should be a natural, essential part of all manufacturing. Already, you know, when you buy a can of soda, you don't have to ask, you don't have to say, I need the recycled content version. Instead, all the cans have recycled content. And that's what we should be aiming for all products, along with reducing, reusing, and incorporating other essential sustainability attributes as well. And that's what all our efforts at Buy Recycled are working towards. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Susan. That's helpful, and amazing history with Conservatory. If you could drop off now, and maybe Alicia could come on and talk about the Responsible Purchasing Network.
Okay, I'm trying to turn my mic on. Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, welcome everybody. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on Responsible Purchasing Network. We're about a 10-year-old organization that has been working with sustainability directors and purchasing managers and other advocates to really create demand for environmentally preferable and now even more socially responsible goods and services. We are one of the founding members of the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council, which is a broader network which also includes manufacturers. So what I wanted to do is just give you a quick overview of some of the things, the ways in which we get involved in promoting the Buy Recycled movement and meeting Buy Recycled goals. So there's 4 ways: through policy and program development, through specification development, through contract development, and then helping our members to track the economic benefits and the environmental benefits of buying recycled and other environmentally preferable products. So let me just talk a little bit about each one of these. So we get involved soup to nuts. We find that jurisdictions do more if they actually have a formal policy. Originally, those policies were, some of them were buy recycled. The first green purchasing policies were buy recycled policies, and some of them were very prescriptive. Our paper should have this much, 30% post-consumer recycled, and they would go through. They can be quite long. Today, those buy recycled requirements are incorporated into typically a broader either green purchasing, or what's called EPP, environmentally preferable purchasing policy, or into even broader sustainable purchasing policy, which looks at social equity, et cetera. We want to make sure that those policies, even though they're broader, have very specific requirements so that the purchasers know exactly what to do. So that could be saying, whenever possible or in all these categories, we should at the minimum be following the post-consumer recycled content minimums that are in the EPA's comprehensive procurement guidelines, which are the number one standard that's used. We also help our members, cities, states, businesses, to build their programs in addition to adopting their policies, because we found a lot of policies were adopted but not implemented. So we've looked at what are the roles and responsibilities of the purchasing department, the environmental department, and other agencies, making requirements for action planning, and also for tracking and reporting. So that's number one, policy and program development. We do have a free guide called Sustainable Purchasing Playbook for Cities. Even if you're not a city, there's good guidance on how to develop your policy. There's actually a model policy, and many entities are benchmarking their programs against the playbook recommendations. Second, we develop specifications for various different product categories. So a lot of people to say, well, just tell us what to buy. And so we look product by product. We actually have a new tool that we're rolling out right now, which has 75 product categories, and it tells you, okay, for plastic bags, it should have at least 10% post-consumer recycled content. And we have easy guides that tell people that we've been working on with the city of Santa Monica, which say, okay, for janitorial paper products, look for these certifications and make sure it has at least this much post-consumer recycled content. So people know exactly what it is that they should be putting into their specs. And this is important to have harmonization so that industry gets a harmonized market signal about what it is that they should be manufacturing. The third thing is that we then take those specs and help to develop them into contracts. So that means having very specific minimum requirements, maybe giving additional points if the recycled content is higher, developing a list of products that should be included on the contract with specific minimum recycled content requirements. So there are lots of ways in which the contracts often don't do that, and we'll talk about barriers, but we want to make sure that the products that that have recycled content are the ones that industry knows they need to offer those products on those contracts. And then finally, we help to be able to document those benefits that Susan was talking about. We help our members to figure out how much recycled content products they're purchasing, which isn't always as easy as it sounds, because a lot of it is not reported correctly, or there's confusion about that. And then to use tools like the paper calculator to document the environmental benefits. So I'm going to hand it back.
Thanks, Alicia. Amazing work. Really driven a lot of the marketplace behind the scenes through all these municipal and county and our other government and business to business purchasing. We don't see it necessarily as consumers on the front line, but just amazing work. I want to call up next Lynn Hoffman from Eureka Recycling, and Lynn's the co-director there and also the national coordinator for the Alliance of Mission-Based Recyclers. Recently founded, and Quality Center is part of that. And Lynn, you guys have also been working with Green Blue and the sorry, blue-green. And your mic is off, so you might bring your mic on. Excellent.
Okay.
And also do a lot of mill direct marketing, which is really, excellent and amazing. And so if you could just talk a little bit about what those two things are, that'd be really great.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Martin. Maybe I'll just do another quick plug for Amber, just to say this alliance of mission-based recyclers. We've all worked together for decades, but we are just more formally launching this alliance, and so we'll have a website and more public-facing projects in the coming months. So stay tuned. Eureka Recycling, we're a zero-waste organization and nonprofit recycler. Our MRF does about 100,000 tons of single stream a year. And as Martin said, because of our zero-waste mission, we've been focused on quality from our inception, and that's allowed us to create some really strong relationships with markets directly. So we don't use a lot of brokers. We have a lot of individual relationships, which allows us to get direct feedback from our markets about what is and isn't working in the sorted material we're sending them. And it builds trust, and it also is easier to track what's actually happening to our materials. Once it goes through a chain of brokers, it can be easy to lose that thread. So we've tried to do that, and we focus on local markets as much as we can, not to fetishize local, but of course that's a big part of the equation when you're looking at the environmental benefits and the triple bottom line decisions around recycling. So currently all of our materials stay in North America, and about 95% stay in the region that we're in. Around 80, a little over 80% actually stay right in our community. One thing I think that I wanted to get into, we've been looking, in order to buy recycled, well, we have to recycle and have that content to feed into new materials. And I think that, we've seen these big voluntary commitments that have been around for decades, and they haven't really resulted in investments or meaningful growth in capture rates, as Martin mentioned, or material value in the marketplace. So despite these expressed goals, without any regulation or teeth or no meaningful EPR, it's really the community who's still footing the bill. So as an example, our facility, we recently did a $2 million upgrade, primarily to deal with the increased glut of PET bottles. And we know that massive amount that we deal with is only about 15% of what's truly out there. So if we're going to capture it all in order to meet these new commitments and needs, there's got to be investment from the producers in the infrastructure. To top it off, on the back end, our recycled PET content is still competing with heavily subsidized, now virtually free fossil fuels, and we're still struggling to move PET for a price that works for us. So, we're interested in recycled content mandates as a lever, a carrot rather than a stick, and I think there's a lot of potential there to decouple recycled content from the price of virgin fossil fuels and plastics in particular, but I think this applies to all material streams. And then of course the questions that are being raised now is around how we verify this, how do we make sure it's transparent, how is it authenticated? And there's still a lot of questions to be answered in that space, like where along the supply chain is recycled content certified? How are we distinguishing between pre-consumer and post-consumer and post-industrial? Why does that matter? How do we label all of those pieces? And there's a lot of different pathways kind of popping up and new certification projects evolving. But with my remaining time, I just want to call to your attention one in particular, the recycled material standard that's coming out of this stakeholder process led by Blue Green and the Sustainable Packaging Institute. Their proposed standard is available for review and open for public comment right now until December 18th. And so I'll put a link into the chat when my time is up here. And the last piece just to point to there is that with all of these certification schemes, we're seeing credit trading kind of evolve parallel. And I think that'll be important to watch. We've learned a lot about the opportunities and shortfalls of various credit trading schemes in the carbon and climate space. So it'll be important to apply those lessons here so we're not creating more pay to pollute programs. And, we're making sure that these efforts to increase recycled content are actually resulting in less use of virgin fossil fuels and trees and all of that. So with that, I will grab this link and I'll turn it back to Martin.
Thanks, Lynn. That was great and short and succinct. Appreciate it. Jeff Donlevy is going to round us out. He's from Ming's Recycling. So they're a buyer as well as a seller. And, really pleased to have you on board with us today, Jeff. And if you could just talk a little bit too about, these mandatory recycling requirements. California has a few of them and they affect your job day to day and markets that you deal with. And if you could just talk a little bit about those, that'd be really great.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Martin, for having me. General manager with Ming's Recycling and Ming's Resources in California. We have 3 facilities spread out between Sacramento and the Bay Area. Excuse me. We started as a small recycling center, and Kenny Luong, he's the president of the company. He's grown the business to be one of the largest state certified processors in California. We buy material from recycling centers and material recovery facilities, as well as industrial and commercial customers from distribution centers, warehouses, and other large commercial generators. Currently, we're handling 25 to 27,000 tons a month of material, and on an annual basis with the California Redemption Program, we're handling over 7 billion aluminum cans and PET bottles coming through our facility. Our interface is with the recycling centers, the MRFs distribution centers, bringing the material back to our facility and doing a quality control check. And then from our facilities, we ship it off to the mills, aluminum mills in Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee, a lot in the Southeast. The plastics, fortunately, most of the plastics we have are staying in California. We have a wonderful infrastructure for number 2 plastic and PET bottles. So we're able to keep all of that in California. There is an emerging market down in Mexico where there's a development of facilities down there. Material moving offshore, we still ship fiber, cardboard, some mixed paper is going offshore, but definitely meeting the quality standards set through National Sword, prior to that Green Fence. The minimum content laws within California, we've had several that have been around for a long time that have helped, going way back with newspaper minimum content laws. A lot of cities have adopted purchasing programs to require minimum content, a lot of it geared towards fiber, which has helped. Aluminum cans hasn't needed that just because of the intrinsic value of aluminum. It's far better to recycle aluminum cans than going through the process of extracting virgin material for that material. Recently, California adopted Assembly Bill 793 with Assembly Member Phil Ting out of San Francisco. And I think it's the nation's largest post-consumer content requirement. It's going to require post-consumer content in plastic bottles, 15% by 2022, 25% by 2025, and the big bar that we're going to try and get over is 50% by 2030. Right now, meeting the 15% level, that's going to be pretty easy with the clean material coming from our buyback centers. The 25% threshold, that's going to be a little challenging with the need for more recycling centers and cleaner material coming out of the buyback centers. The 50% threshold, that's definitely going to be a high bar to meet. I think we can make it, but more take-back programs through our California Redemption Program will have to be enhanced so we can get that material coming back and making sure that consumers have the convenience to return their containers, whether it's aluminum cans, plastic bottles, or glass bottles, to get their deposits back. But that is the greatest and cleanest supply of quality material that these producers will need to meet any, whether it's a voluntary mandate or a mandatory content law. It's ensuring that there is a clean enough supply. We definitely support bottle bills in different states and in California, because that is the cleanest way to get the best supply that the manufacturers need. Because when you run into quality issues downstream, that slows down their process, which ultimately slows down the demand and the price that recyclers like ours or our customers would get for the material. So we definitely support the minimum content legislation that was recently passed, and we see a need for it in the future. So Martin, hopefully that touched on a couple items.
Fantastic. Yeah, and laid out some of the major concerns. I want to ask the rest of the panelists to join us on screen, if you will. Just maybe put your camera on and stay mic'd, and keep your mic off unless you're speaking, so that we don't get too much feedback or reverb. And I really appreciate the general orientation. I just thought we'd start off. We have, maybe half an hour in the session left, so let's try and keep our comments brief so we can cover more ground. But of these programs that have some been going since the 70s and others much newer, like what's really working? What has really kicked ass? What's really been exciting and successful?
Okay, I don't know if Susan's finished up, but I can start off. I think we're seeing growth of things like programs, growth of policies, maybe integrated into a general, actually climate framework. And I think the more that we can make the point that it takes a lot less energy to manufacture products and have people look at the overall carbon footprint of products, that could, that is a train station and is going, and so much interest in that. The other two things quickly I'll say is integration of recycled content into third-party so that the recycled content is verified. So for example, Green Seal and Eco Logo, they were for their janitorial paper standard, yes, they address a wide range of things like chlorine bleaching and things, but they require or at least get points for recycled content. So when you have a certification that is pushing along these standards. I'd like to see mandatory. It used to be that way with Green Seal, but it isn't anymore. So we need to get them back to saying, hey, I know if I buy Green Seal certified paper towels that they're going to have at least the minimum EPA guideline for that. And so I think that's really important. And then just there's a lot of effort been put hammering away at Staples and Office Depot and Grainger and all these companies to make it easier to navigate to these recycled content products, to give filters so that you can say, I want recycled content paper, and they all come up. They come up at the top. So there's just a lot being done to try to make it easier for consumers, and institutional and non-institutional, to navigate to those recycled content products.
Great, thank you. Susan, did you have something?
Get my mic back on. Thanks. One of the basic things is just letting people know what are the recycled products. I mean, in the very beginning, at Conservatory, we published one of the first ever lists of here's the recycled papers that are available, so that people even knew what to buy, where to get them, what to look for. And then since then, there's been lots of work done on certifications and all the different details that Alicia was talking about. But I think Nina talked about wanting to get this more available to the public. And I'm thinking of like bathroom tissue in particular, that for the most part, people don't have any way of knowing which ones have the recycled content. And there's been reasons that the paper industry has given for why they don't want to do that. But I think that these days, it's really important to be able to look at them and see, oh, there's recycled content in this, especially because it's really high quality products at this point too.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for all your work. You know, at the Ecology Center, we also have a public resource center and retail store, and we were one of the early vendors of post-consumer office paper and 100% post-consumer ledger. And, you know, over the years, you know, that has become commonplace. You can get it at Kinko's, you know, and or at least a high, you know, high content. And, you know, that's, I would say, a real success that has become available and mainstream, but hasn't sort of taken over either. It's still kind of like organic in my mind, you know, this sort of niche area. It isn't just ubiquitous and across the board. So the next question we wanted to get into a little bit, and if other people want to weigh on what's worked, feel free to do so, but I'm going to add to that. What are the barriers? What's held us back, and what have the limitations been?
Well, that kind of, I guess, holding back until what's not working, because, you know, if we function within a capitalistic society, then we have to have full disclosure of what's impacting what, and I think that's been largely missing. And when I mentioned the public, we did a really just super off the cuff kind of survey of folks in Sonoma, California, a while back, just like, what do you think about recycled content? And most people said, ooh, that doesn't sound like I want to use it. So there was no connection with recycling because it's just been put it in the bin and it goes somewhere. We haven't really connected it back to what the benefits are. And then there are legitimate concerns too. And you can tell I'm very much coming from the focus of plastics, but I was on a panel based in England last week, and they were talking about how to increase recycled content for food grade. Well, in Europe, because they have REACH legislation, they have fewer chemicals that they're worried about getting back into the product. Whereas here we have 2,000 more on the market. So there is legitimate concern as to if you're going to use recycled content, how are you going to do it safely, particularly in food contact? So there's just a lot to address from the upstream, I think, and then using technology. And there are opportunities through technology like Digimark, where you know what's in it, how much, what's the impact. That's some great opportunity.
Thanks. Someone else? Lynn?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think from the supply side, you know, I think quality has been a major barrier in terms of, you know, as a result of mass consolidation in the industry, leaving markets little room to push back on their biggest suppliers as the quality was more and more degraded, as there were bigger and bigger pushes towards single stream and efficiency and cheap versus effective. You know, what our metrics for success around recycling have been, I think have really degraded the quality of recycled content for all materials, particularly fiber. And so, you know, I think the national sword was obviously a huge wake-up call, and that's not a new topic of conversation, but I think, you know, we're all, that transparency we need, not just around the recycled content and where it goes in that supply chain, but, you know, what's happening after we leave the bin, to Nina's point, I think is going to change that.
Susan, you want to add something?
Yeah, you know, I think that the recycling system that we have in the U.S. has got way out of balance over the past couple of decades because it got centered way too much on collection, as if that's all that there is to recycling. But as Lynn was talking about, it's really important for MRFs to know who is it that they're selling to and what are the requirements that they have to make products out of it. Because really, it's obviously important to be collecting materials, but if those can't get used by a manufacturer, then we didn't even do recycling. And so we have to get the manufacturers back into a more balanced kind of position. With the markets closing down in China, that's sort of forcing us to do that. But we really abandoned our manufacturers here for a long, long time. And we need to be looking, all of the MRFs need to be looking at, and all of the local government programs need to be looking at, who is actually going to use this material, and what quality do they need, and how do we provide it so that they'll make the products that we can buy in the buy recycle programs, so that we can expand recycling and recycled content the ways that I was talking about before, so that it becomes part of all the products.
Yeah, we're seeing increased commitments on many fronts of saying we want to buy this stuff, and then you get into it, and Jeff, I'm sure you've had many experiences along these lines of like, yeah, they want to buy it, and then you say, well, I got this, do you want to buy it? And they're like, well, actually, you know, it needs to be different than what you are trying to sell me. And Lynn, I know you've had this experience in trying to sell direct to Coke, and maybe you guys can talk about, you know, sort of that disconnect. You know, you hear the bottler saying, yeah, we want to buy all this pet, and then, you know, you're out there in the market and you can't move pet. So what's going on?
Jeff, do you want to, I can give a quick anecdote and then you could probably, yeah.
Lynn, go ahead.
Fun, great. Yeah, as I was mentioning in my opening remarks, we've, you know, had a really challenging time moving PET, specifically in the last year, and so worked with some contacts and tried to start selling direct to brands. And the challenge there has been, yeah, we want it, but we don't want green, and we don't want certain kinds of labels, and we don't want things that we're selling. And so there's obviously this, you know, the design for recyclability is another major missing piece is in this marketplace in the States. You know, and it's pushed end markets into these positions of saying like, well, we can handle it. You know, like the new Amazon, I'm going to probably get in trouble for calling this out, but the new Amazon envelope, it's brown paper and it's got some kind of expanded glue in the inside that looks like styrofoam. But it's all the things that you use in a cardboard box. So it's this innovative package that should be recyclable. The glue is not recyclable. It's not going to turn into new paper. Like that's an outthrow, you know, but you talk to the end markets and they're like, well, it doesn't cause a huge problem, which is not the same as this will get recycled. It's just a different, you know, but the pickier they get, they're kind of stuck between the rock and the hard place, recyclers and end markets, I think, when there's just not any regulation about what's coming in the door, and then, you know, monopolies around what's going out. But Jeff,
Yeah.
get over to you. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I'll just be more pointed, maybe.
Yeah, sure, do.
And just say, you know, Coke is pumping out all this green PET
yeah.
and won't buy it back.
That's right.
And then, you know, puts you in the position of having to try and figure out how to sort that out. And I know, Jeff, you deal with this and many other related issues like this. Maybe you can expand on that.
You're
still muted.
Yep.
There we go.
Great.
Thank you. Lynn, you touched on many great points. I'll just jump in on what's working. I think in the last 20, 25 years, recycling awareness has really enlightened a lot of people looking to recycle items through bottle bills, curbside collection programs. The access to programs is very high throughout the US. Curbside collection programs is available to most people. Processing technology, screens, optical sorters, definitely helping lower the processing costs for the processors. But I think one of the things that hasn't been working the last couple of years is we've turned the recycling programs from recycling good material into trying to recycle a lot of material. And unfortunately, it's created a lot of cross-contamination. So the optical sorters that can kick out all the PET bottles are now kicking out thermoforms. They're kicking out other bottles with PET labels. They're so good at what they're doing, but the packaging that manufacturers are using these days, they're getting very innovative, but they're starting to use a lot of incompatible material. I think the curbside programs and the commercial programs, they need to take a step back and realize that they're recycling programs, not diversion programs, and only include material that has a viable market. So you don't run into a quality issue, a cross-contamination issue, and focus on what can be recycled, and make sure that that system is working very well. We are competing against oil prices these days due to domestic and foreign oil policies. The price of oil is very low, which impacts the demand for recycled plastic. So focusing on quality and getting back to basics, I think, is going to help everybody. Susan mentioned making sure that the MRFs and the people that are generating this material are really doing a downstream verification of what is happening to the material. The Basel Amendment is really going into effect in January. So exporting mixed plastics is going to change, which is going to help a lot of environments around the world, because people were shipping material to Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, thinking that it was getting recycled, but only a small percentage was actually getting recycled. And the rest of the material was ending up on a beach, a landfill, it was being burned, something bad was happening to it. So
a lot of wish
I think we
recycling
need
going
to
on. I'd like to add a
take a
few
step
things
back.
from the purchasing perspective, if that's okay. It will echo a few of the things that we hear. We need really clean materials. Otherwise, people just turn off and are not going to buy the things. And we've seen things like, PFAS Teflon chemicals in the recycled content plates. We've seen news articles of electronics getting recycled into cutlery, and then it ends up having lead in it. We've had the carpet manufacturers say, God, the requirement is for recycled content, but the only recycled content out there is PVC, which is old and has a lot of lead and stuff in it. Or coal fly ash, which releases mercury from the back of the thing. So, I think there really needs to be this clean waste stream, or people are going to continue to say, why should I buy this stuff? It's inferior, or it's toxic and I'm worried about it. At the same time, they go to buy recycled paper and either they can't find it at the store because it's, something that is seen as a niche market, as you're saying. A lot of times, people don't go to stores right now, but, it's harder to find it. It's more expensive. And sometimes it doesn't even need to be more expensive. It's that the companies that are the middleman know they can charge more money for recycled content products, or they're not ordering them in large enough quantities. And so they're not marking them up as, or they're not giving them as deep of a discount. I think there also could be, on the specification side, like I said, there's just confusion with the EPA CPG. It feels like there should be one standard. A recycled content product has at least 50% recycled content and it's post-consumer, and that's it, as opposed to like 10% for bags and 30% for paper. And it's too hard for purchasers to try to navigate that and the post-consumer and the non-post-consumer. If NRC really wants to be creating markets for post-consumer stuff, they should be taking a very strong stand that the EPA should be just setting minimum guidelines for post-consumer. And I was concerned that, some of the recycling organizations, were not doing that. So I think there's just more that we can do to try to mainstream it and make sure it's safe and that it's clear, the products are labeled and people can find them, just to make the whole system run easier.
Okay, well, that kind of takes us to the next topic that, there's this sort of clearly the major brands understand that their consumers want environmentally sound packaging. And, part of the problem we've had with recycling is that they have then driven messaging that everything, all these things, which should go in the blue bin. And, they're under extreme pressure, particularly in plastic packaging, where most of the major consumer goods have moved towards, maybe for climate reasons or LCA reasons or other convenient reasons of cost and convenience, and yet they're not making the design changes that are necessary. So they want to sell a Tide bottle that's bright orange that contaminates the whole HDPE stream and put 20% post-consumer content in it, but then they can't ever buy it back. So there's no circularity. There's really, I think, feels like there's a rich opportunity right now, because we're hearing there's such pressure on the brands and some of the retailers, Walmart, Target in particular, that they're actually having real conversations. For the first time, we're seeing the whole commodity chain come together, and things like the recycling partnership, where you've got the petrochemical industry in there with the packagers in there with the retailers and the waste haulers. There's real opportunity, I feel, And the question is, will that opportunity be squandered on marketing solutions as opposed to real substantive solutions like the ones, Alicia, that you're just mentioning in terms of cleaning up the flow? But, you know, within this realm of an increased potential demand for recycled content, there seem to be a lot of opportunities for, you know, well, if rPET gets decoupled from virgin and has a price premium, maybe I'll just slip in my virgin and blend a little bit of that in on the side. Like, where's the transparency? Where's the certification? Where's the validation that we, you know, and we've seen this, people threading these loopholes in plastic bag minimum recycled content in California, for example. You know, if minimum recycled content or even voluntary commitments are made, where's the validation? Where's, you know, where's that space headed? What do you guys know about that?
Well, I feel like, Lynn, you should probably answer this since you're RMS. I was thinking about this really from an international perspective too, because it is still a global market, and companies that are sourcing material, we've got to look at an overall standard. So there's a lot of work at play right now from the NSF, as Len mentioned with RMS. There's NIST has been looking into this. There's also the ISCC Plus, and there's a lot of controversy in terms of, is it going to be something that we, you know, look at, how does mass balance come into this? What is corporate averaging? How does that impact or water down certain things? So the question, I think the answer is that it's completely up in the air right now, but it's being discussed I've had several conversations with different Senate staff that are looking at what's the first step. And so I wanted to make sure we answer Ruth's question about, do we need more biorecycled or do we need minimum content? At the core of it, yeah, I think we need top level carbon policy, you know, climate change policy. We need EPR that's eco-modulation. We need recycled content. And we're never going to get the content if we don't have the supply. So we need bottle bills, all of it, really. So I probably should turn it over to someone, but I think that's the key, is that we've got to really get big picture and look at what our fundamental goal is, and then have the policy that supports that overarching fundamental goal.
Lynn, can you, or Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in on the verification, especially for post-consumer content. That's going to be challenging. I mean, it's going to be a domestic and an international trade policy, because the technology for plastic these days is so high that they can convert post-consumer plastic, and the IV detection between post-consumer and virgin, very similar. So if it's done in a foreign country, verification is very tough. They could put 10% post-consumer in there, 90% virgin, slap a 50% label on there, and when it gets to the US, it'll be very difficult to confirm what the true post-consumer content is. Buying domestic, whether it's California or Minnesota, reclaimers, somebody domestic, you can do that verification. But it's really going to come down to a domestic and international trade policy on where people are buying their post-consumer content material.
Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot more to add than what I kind of opened up with. Like Nina said, I think there's a lot of questions to be asked, and I think there's the bigger need, and then like right now the blue-green conversations are fascinatingly in the weeds around the difference between post-consumer and pre-consumer. How is that defined? Who's validating that? Where does post-industrial fit in? Is that, you know, how do we count that in terms of additionality? There's so many loopholes. As Martin was saying, like there's a real need to get into the weeds. And I did put the comment in the chat for the comment link for the public comment period. It's going to be important to be tracking these things as they evolve, but it's very tech heavy. It's kind of making our heads spin, I'll be honest, but we're jumping in there to try to figure it out because it's going to be really impactful. You know, and I think we know, again, it's all so interconnected, but I think, Martin, you've said that to meet the demand of the California bill is going to take every pound of rPET collected and processed in the US. You know, so these international trade policies are going to become issues fast, and how do we capture more? Hopefully it does drive the demand for more infrastructure and collection, but who's footing the bill for that in the absence of any EPR schemes? That I think will be another big challenge.
So I'd like to add, from the purchaser's point of view, I think about, how do we make it more advantageous for the companies to do this? How do we really reward them for doing the right thing? And part of it is making sure that consumers know which products, are out there. And I think about Energy Star versus the comprehensive procurement guidelines. Energy Star certification program. To be able to have that Energy Star, you actually get a logo, people can find that product. The CPG is this like old thing, it's never been really updated, it kind of still sits there, it's confusing. There were just comments, and RPN commented on that. I'd be happy to send around the comments, but we said, look, it's not verified, there's no third-party certification, there's a little bit here and there. So we're trying to come up with one tool and we're working with an entity called Ecomedes, which the federal government uses, where you can say, okay, here's the standard, 30% post-consumer. You click a button and you get all the products that meet that standard. But those are being collected when there's third-party certification. So Green Seal in its office supplies, copy paper standard, will verify. So if a company says, oh, this has 30% post-consumer, it's Green Seal or Eco Logo or anybody who has those standards. So we're trying to get more stuff shoved into the third-party certification bucket so that it can get picked up, because those third-party certifiers, even FSC now, if it says that this thing has 100% post-consumer, FSC looked at it and verified that it happened. And so, that's one way I think that you can start to get a system set up where there's actually somebody doing that verification. So I would say that there are sometimes we can pick it up through an environmental product declaration. It'll say, oh, this carpet has 30% post-consumer and it's this. So, but, we're still dealing with the fact that so much information, so there's a ton of greenwashing out there, especially around things like plastic bags. I can never figure out, does this thing really have 10% post-consumer? The manufacturer will say one thing, the vendor will say something different. And so we just need to be pushing for third-party verification of recycled content as a main thing, so that we can get, we can have confidence that the product actually has it, and we can point people to those products and know how much is in there.
I think
this is really great, and I think Nina wanted to talk a little bit about that with BioRecycle. Gary, if it's possible to put the slides back up, I think she has a couple slides. This third-party verification, there's APC has a
APR.
Certifying of certifiers.
APR.
UL is doing something. Sorry, APR. Thank you. There's the UL thing. We're getting these credit trading programs coming out. They have some kind of traceability function. How does this compare to FSC with fiber and paper and wood? Lynn, you wanted to
Thank you. I just want to throw in quickly
Nina.
too. I think the other thing that we should keep our eyes on is how chemical recycling, which means a million different things, but how that is entered into these definitions of post-consumer. If our ultimate goal is to use less fossil fuels, right? This is around plastics recycling. What we have to look at the impacts of these processes and what's going in and coming out of chemical recycling, just because that particular polymer becomes circular. Anyway, we've got it's all the devil's in the details on all these definitions that are being certified too.
Martin, if I could interject, in the last 5 minutes, NRC wanted to know from this conversation, what should NRC do? There's been a lot of proposals made here today of what's needed. Is it appropriate for NRC to do that, to champion that, to be part of a team to champion that, working with ROs? What should NRC do? I'd really like to hear from the panelists on what should NRC do.
I'm going to start off with that. They should be pressuring EPA to really simplify those comprehensive procurement guidelines, minimum post-consumer recycled content whenever possible, and set up a verification program and verify and identify products that meet those EPA recycled content guidelines.
Somebody else? Or Nina?
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted you, Gary, to show the next slide after that, because what the NRC can do as being the coalition of multi-material and a unique organization that can really touch the public, Alicia, really this point, like when the public knows, then they have their purchasing power behind encouraging, being that catalyst. So that is why we created first the info exchange as a way to show where's the market activity across the country. It's not very much. Where are the EPP programs? Where are the minimum content? Where are the bottle bills? So you can go in and learn from other people. And I encourage people to help us get more information in so we can elevate the dialogue of why there's not enough policy or good policy. We do have policy. It's subsidizing a lot of bad things. The second thing is, so that's the info exchange that you can go just directly to our homepage. We'll make it more available also through circularityinaction.com. If you go on to the next, well, just one more thing here. What we did for that info exchange was try to pull, by working with other people who have a lot more experience than us, what already was worked on years ago on market development. So let's consolidate so we're not reinventing the wheel. So I encourage people to get their programs listed in there so we can learn from each other. So then the next slide is, I don't know if you can switch to the next one, Gary. The other piece is that one more back, is that the transparency, as we're talking about here, because we do the annual study to know how much, I can at least ask the companies that list, do you have third-party certification? So we list that if they have it or not, to make sure it's post-consumer, post-commercial material, not post-industrial. How much? Is it multi-material? What type of resin is it? So that we can at least have that marketplace, because we could feel this completely void in the marketplace. So then you can share it, you can look and find, and you go purchase it directly. So that's why we created this free tool that is a widget that any organization we can, as NRC, can share it with other state recycling organizations to help emphasize that. Go on to the next slide.
Nina, does it show that I was looking at that tool? I couldn't see where it said whether it was post-consumer versus not post-consumer.
It all has to be post-consumer. So the EPA says post-consumer, post-commercial, not post-industrial. We don't include that. It's really important. So we just don't list if that's what the claim. So we don't. So I think the NRC could, what should the NRC do? I think we could start simple by just sharing companies that we verified have recycled content. Like, let's just celebrate those companies. It's not the be all end all. And let's drive smarter policy. I think there's one more slide after that. If you want to go to one more slide. Yeah, and so then we also have the info exchange where I'm going to be trying to gather all that I learned here to get everyone else's tools that fit their criteria. How do you help circularity where you are in the value chain so we can share all of those tools with people? So I encourage folks to get involved, and we'll be sharing this with NRC and other organizations.
Thanks, Nina. We're just about out of time. Jeff, you have something?
Yeah, just real quick. I would encourage all cities to reevaluate their collection programs, turn them into recycling programs. If material is not actually being recycled, take it off the program so it doesn't contaminate those that are there. Then for NRC, to let the beverage manufacturers know they should be using containers that are recyclable, move away from colored PET, move away from incompatible labels, and promote those items. So that'll help with the circularity of it, because there's too many products out there that are contaminating the products that can be recycled. So move away from the bad stuff and into the good stuff.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. I want to thank our fine panelists and Gary Liss for corralling us all together, and NRC for this amazing conference. And we'll see you all next time.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
And we're going to be going into the floor for a final meeting with the exhibitors. Alec Cooley is going to talk about that.
Great. Well, Yes, we are now at the end of the sessions for the day and for the conference. Before we go back, I do want to, again, thank all of our speakers and moderators. You've done a fantastic job. We've had excellent sessions throughout, and it's been a lot of great content. So very much want to thank all of you. A couple other housekeeping items before we do go. I want to point out that we have an attendee directory for everybody who registered for the conference and chose to opt in or did not opt out of the attendee directory. And that was emailed out to the primary email for all attendees this morning. So if you want to stay connected with people outside of the conference, look in your email for that attendee directory. If you don't see it, feel free to reach out to us as the organizers so we can provide that. If you can, Gary, if you can bring up the slide just talking about the exhibit hall. I do want to point out that we have another hour and 15 minutes in the exhibit hall and networking. We strongly encourage folks to stick around. I know you probably have the pressure of emails and things to get back to, but as you probably have learned or seen, this remote platform has really given a great opportunity to network, and I encourage folks to stick around and take advantage of the opportunity to socialize and above all, visit with our exhibitors. These are the folks who have helped to make the conference possible, so I strongly encourage you to stick around for that. We will have, there are two more things happening over the next hour that I'll point to. One at 1:15 up on the second floor of the hall, where there's an opportunity to meet with some of the Murray Fox scholars. So if you want to meet some of the students who are receiving those, I encourage you to stop by and visit with them at the tables on the second floor. Also at 1:45, we're going to have the wrap up for the National Policy Town Hall is going to be taking place. That will be over in the other Track B room where we've been doing the other sessions. So as with before, when we're in floor mode, if you want to jump over for that discussion at 1:45, look at the center banner in the middle of the floor of this main room, and that will transport you over to the other room for that discussion. If we can go to the next slide. Again, here's just showing you where you can find the exhibitors on the floor between the two different floors. Next slide. I want to thank all our sponsors one last time, again, for helping make this conference possible. I want to recognize Recology, Waxy, Paint Care, Recycling Partnership, Zinker Recycling, Zero Waste Sonoma, Lobius Intelligent Systems, Strategic Materials, Mattress Recycling Council, Green Mountain Technology, and California Resource Recovery Association. Next slide. And then, of course, our silver and our bronze sponsors, all of them have really helped to make this conference possible. Back in March, when we had to cancel the conference, it certainly upended everything, and obviously for everybody. And we really appreciate the fact that they've stuck with us and helped support this conference going through, even as everything has changed to a virtual format. So one last time, I thank you to our sponsors. And last slide. So if we can go to the last slide. So finally, I want to recognize again everybody who's helped to make this conference work. Actually, go back so we can see the folks to recognize. We've had a fantastic team that has really come together of both volunteers and staff members, and we could not have done this conference without them. So a big heartfelt thank you to all of you. To Karen Kaplan, who's helped to coordinate all the speakers and moderators, Portia Sinote, Juliana Gerber, Despina Krasulis, Todd Sutton, Orrin Wool, Sarah D'Souza, just for helping with all the different aspects of registration and more. Amanda Waddell has done a fantastic job with helping to coordinate some of our partner organizations, helping with the promotions. And then just with coordinating the volunteers during this conference itself, Alina Beckerman and Jill Danello with greeneducation.us have all done a fantastic job. And again, thanks to Chris DeTournay for coordinating all the table topic leaders. So this does bring us to the end of the official program. Again, please stick around and support our exhibitors over the next hour. Finally, one last thing, I just want to acknowledge my co-organizers, Gary Liss and Leslie Lukash. Both of them had spent a whole year planning the original conference that was going to take place in Berkeley. And then, of course, we had to do a quick pivot. And it's taken a whole nother equal effort to shift over to a virtual format, but they both have done a fantastic job. Gary did a great job pulling together the program. I think we all saw that over the last couple of days. So with that, I'll send everybody back to the floor, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future.